If you live in New York City, or even if you don't, you know that Sex and the City, the show, had a cultural chokehold, especially on young women. It's part of the New York City catalog of entertainment. It's part of that classic New York City genre from the 1980s. 1990s is when this show was originally actually filmed. But it's like Gossip Girl, which is all about the Upper East Side aesthetic. It's like Moonstruck. It's like When Harry Met Sally. It's like When You've Got Mail. It's quintessential New York City, cosmopolitan, the hustle and bustle, and also the rat race and the crazy romantic adventures that people can have in New York City. But it was an immaculate show from my point of view, at least in terms of vibes. I personally identified with Carrie Bradshaw's addiction to Manolo Blahnik shoes, but also her writing career. Yes, she was a sex columnist, but nonetheless, I kind of live vicariously through her now when I watch this show and old seasons and episodes. But they bastardized Sex in the City, and they made it woke to the point where all of our favorite characters, the iconic quad, Carrie, Samantha, Miranda, and Charlotte, went off the rails. In various ways, they lost the plot. And they got what was coming for them with this show, really. They just announced recently that the sequel spinoff that has been around for a few years now, and Just Like That, will be canceled after 3 short seasons. Go woke, go broke is still true. And thank God, honestly, that the market just rebuked this and it wasn't the smash success they had hoped for. And there's obvious reasons as to why when I go through the examples of how they ruined something that was already really good. So they made Miranda, who's the lawyer female boss babe in the show. She's just as iconic as the rest of them, but I wouldn't say she's particularly feminine. They made her lesbian, though, for no reason, and they made us believe that she never loved Steve, who is her original love interest from the first iteration of Sex in the City. And honestly, it was kind of a disappointment to see her go down that path when she had a very committed relationship to Steve. It was very random. Then they made Charlotte's daughter trans. Aside from the fact that there's no such thing as a trans child, and we shouldn't be affirming this false ideology in entertainment because it's a dangerous rabbit hole that we're going down as a society. This is also the biggest contradiction ever to what Charlotte actually was in the original show. In the original show, she was traditional, she was preppy, she was like a country club chic kind of girl, and she really wanted to find her husband, get married, have children, have happily ever after. While her friends, she was kind of the foil in many ways to the other 3 friends. Samantha was, for all intents and purposes, a sex addict, treated men like disposable toys, as kind of convenient playthings. And this was supposed to be empowering at the time for young women because Samantha was playing by supposedly the rules that men play by, but just applying it to women. Carrie and Miranda were also not that serious of daters. They were, monogamy in the sense that some of them had boyfriends at various times, but none of them really felt that, or none of them really portrayed the idea to the audience that men were real complements to your lives, that you would want to settle down with one. It was more like just jumping from one to the next in every single season. Countless suitors. So for Charlotte, who, at least from my vantage point, was always the more like restrained, traditional character in the cast, to have a child who the show writers made trans was a very jarring contrast that didn't seem to jive with like Charlotte's philosophy on life. That being said, there's a lot of common sense parents whose children struggle with gender dysphoria because they're in the school system and they can't always monitor what the teachers are telling them or what their friends are telling them or what they're seeing on social media. Sometimes you do go down that rabbit hole, but I don't know why they had to do this to Charlotte. And again, it's problematic to be pushing gender ideology, especially in the context of kids. It's legitimizing and normalizing a very toxic idea, a false idea, that a child has enough cognitive development to know whether they were really meant to be the opposite sex. That's problematic. Anyway, I digress. This show blew it. They had an amazing legacy, and they squandered it. That being said, I'm not saying that the original Sex and the City was a conservative show. It very much was not. As I said, there was plenty of casual sex, plenty of hookup culture, plenty of very progressive ideas for the time. There was some ridiculing of Rudy Giuliani's mayorship during the show, which I fundamentally disagree with. My mom was a director on Wall Street for a long time, and much of my family is from the tri-state area originally, and they'll tell you that Rudy Giuliani's leadership was a godsend for that city because crime went way down. There was a point, I believe, when he made Times Square, which at the time was like a red light district, kind of a really seedy area, into a family-friendly district, which it still is today with the M&M store, the Hershey store. There's a lot of families and, very healthy tourism in Times Square, despite it being not my favorite neighborhood in the city by any means. But anyway, so Sex and the City, they took jabs at conservatives from time to time, but it was pretty subtle. I would say, the most of where they got through their cultural programming was in the dating aspect. And it was a very feminist heavy show. And, I'm cognizant of that fact, but I also could admire that the aesthetics were fabulous and that, there were some things of that show that should have been preserved, and they just took it to a whole new level. And just like that, way, way, way to the left. And frankly, it had a similar effect to me as the Gilmore Girls sequel show. And it was a lot shorter than in Just Like That, but they managed to ruin the character development of everyone who we admired and loved from the first season. And I mean, a lot of the characters in the first Gilmore Girls, original, they weren't angels either. But by the sequel, you're left being like, wow, they managed to make these characters into horrible people. In the original, Rory's a kid who we see grow up. She definitely makes plenty of mistakes romantically, but there's some evolution. There's some positive character development. In the spinoff, she's sleeping with an engaged man who happens to be her ex-boyfriend from college, and spoiler alert, by the end of the spinoff, she, in literally the very last words of the spinoff, is pregnant with her ex-boyfriend from college, who is engaged. So plenty of legitimization of infidelity in that show. Not great. And honestly, I think a lot of people who saw that and who also saw in Just Like That, the Sex and the City spinoff, were very disappointed. So I think in Just Like That, and the fact that it got canned is another example of go woke, go broke. And maybe you think that's a cliche, but in 2024, the electorate was pretty loud and clear. They are rebuking wokeness, DEI, gender ideology in companies, in hiring and firing, in cultural programming. We just don't want it anymore. I'm not saying we're reverting back to some virtuous conservative utopian ideal. I'm saying we're reverting back to normalcy. And normalness is a pretty good mean. It's a pretty good average that I think represents the middle of America. And more signs that we're seeing wokeness breathe its dying breaths is in the fact that we're seeing the opposite of a boycott situation a la Bud Light's PR disaster with Sydney Sweeney, who just starred in an American Eagle ad. And the response from the leftists on Twitter was, of course, ballistic, berserk. They accuse Sydney Sweeney of eugenics, if you can believe that. But the rest of the country is thrilled. We are thrilled to see a hot babe in classic denim in a classic advertising campaign. And now American Eagle stock is flying off the shelves, and their actual stock is skyrocketing. For more on that, click here.